What Is It Wednesdays, presented by the Danbury Public Library. Each time we meet, we'll look at an interesting item from nature and see if we can guess what it is. This week's item is this thing right here. Can you see it? Now, it's really soft, but it's also kind of itchy a little bit. And as you can see, it's got bits of dark coloring and then some light coloring. And if I can find an area for you, it even looks like some parts of it may have been cut off. Can you see it looks a little weird there? Now, I will let you know that we use this to make clothing from, certain types of clothing. And I'll also give you the hint that it came from an animal. It did. Like I said, it's soft, but kind of itchy, and we use it to make clothing, and it comes from an animal. Can you guess what it is? Well, if you'd like to do some research on your own and look around on the internet and books before you come to a conclusion, you can stop the video now and come back and watch the rest later. But if you want to know the answer right now, you can stay tuned because I'm going to give you the answer in 3, 2, 1. Well, this stuff right here is wool. And where do we get wool from? That's right. Wool comes from sheep. Wool is the thick, fluffy coat that's all over the main part of the sheep, all over their back and their sides. We can use wool to make yarn, which is then used to make things like sweaters, coats, and thick socks. And it's valuable to us as humans because it keeps us nice and warm in the winter, because it's very thick and fluffy, even when it's been spun into yarn. But how do we get the wool off the sheep? Because remember, we just can't wander in the woods and find wool lying around. We actually have to take it off the sheep. Well, this is done by a process called sheep shearing. This is where the wool is cut or shorn off. The person who's removing the wool is called a shearer. Sheep are usually shorn once a year during times when the weather is warm. They need their nice thick wool to protect them from the cold in the winter. But in the summertime, it's just a little too hot, so shearing them helps to keep them cool as well. This wool is actually kind of unique. Most sheep, when we look at them, have a single color wool. So you see sheep that have white wool or sheep that have completely black wool. But when we were looking at it earlier, we noticed that there was some dark areas, like here. But there's also light areas, like here. And the neat thing is, this is from one sheep. So this isn't from two different sheep that have been pushed together. This wool came from one single sheep. And that's because it's from a specific breed of sheep. They're called Jacob sheep. And there are these cool guys right here. So one thing you'll notice, first of all, with Jacob sheep is that they have different colored wool. And this means that they are piebald, having both dark and light colored wool at the same time. These awesome creatures have something else that makes them unique and stand out. See all those horns? It looks kind of crazy, right? You see, Jacob sheep are polyserites. This means they have more than 2 horns. While a few Jacob sheep can have 2 horns like normal sheep, most of them will have 4, and even some can have as many as 6. A sheep's horns will grow throughout the whole of the sheep's life, with most of the growth happening in the first few years of life. That means the horn will grow very rapidly when they're young, and then as they start to grow older, the horn growth slows down. Thing is, we need to remember that sheep horns are very different than deer and moose antlers. The antlers of deer and moose are made of a special type of bone that grows very rapidly. In fact, it's some of the fastest growing bone on the earth. And the reason for this is because they regrow their antlers every single year. They start growing them in the spring so they can have them nice and big when they're competing for territories in the fall. But once winter comes along, all those giant antlers, well, they take a lot of energy to grow, and there's not a lot of food in the winter. So, since they don't need those giant antlers anymore, when winter comes along, they fall right off. And then they'll begin to grow a new pair in the spring once the food is plentiful again. Now, sheep don't have antlers, they have horns, and horns behave completely differently. Their horns are hollow sheaths. This means they sit over a little bump of bone that's attached to the sheep or the cow's skull. And this sheath is made out of something that you're probably really familiar with. Can you give your fingernails a little tap for me? Feels kind of hard, don't they? Yeah. And can you feel your hair? Yeah, you got hair, right? Yeah. Well, your fingernails, your hair, and the sheath that is the main part of the horn of a sheep are all made of the same substance called keratin. And the thing is, sheep will keep their horns for the whole of their lives. So they're not going to be growing a new pair every year. That pair they have, or the multiple pairs in the case of our Jacob sheep, are going to be with them the whole of their lives, and they will continue to grow. That's really cool, huh? Thank you for joining me this week on What Is It Wednesday. I hope you've enjoyed learning a little bit about Jacob sheep and other kind of sheep, and I hope you get to visit a farm or a petting zoo where you can get to touch some sheep because they're soft, woolly, and very sweet animals. I will see you again next week as we explore another interesting find from nature and see if we can guess what it is. Until then, happy exploring and stay curious. Bye, everyone.